Bethany Crawford thought refusing to sit beside a black teenager on that flight would be just another day asserting her comfort zone. She never imagined that 15 minutes of disdain would cost her everything. The boy she dismissed, he'd just qualified for the Olympics. And her boss was watching the entire confrontation unfold from 3 rows back. Before we dive into this shocking story of prejudice, consequences, and redemption, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you believe actions have consequences, hit that like button right now. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Trust me, what happens next will leave you speechless. Now let's get into the story. Bethany Crawford had built what she considered a perfect life. At 42 years old, she was a senior manager at Morrison & Associates, one of Atlanta's most prestigious consulting firms. She lived in a gated community in Buckhead, drove a luxury sedan, and prided herself on her professional accomplishments. Her calendar was filled with client dinners, corporate events, and charity galas, where she mingled with Atlanta's elite. She had worked hard to climb the corporate ladder, and she wore her success like armor. Her husband Devin was a successful accountant, and their 2 children, Chloe and Wyatt, attended private schools. On paper, everything was flawless. That Tuesday evening, Bethany boarded a flight from Phoenix to Chicago with the mild irritation of someone accustomed to business class but forced into economy due to company budget cuts. She settled into her window seat, arranged her leather handbag beneath the seat in front of her, pulled out her tablet, and hoped the middle seat beside her would remain empty. The plane was filling up quickly, and she watched passengers shuffle down the aisle with their carry-on luggage babies, crying couples arguing over overhead bin space. She sighed, plugged in her earbuds, and tried to ignore the chaos around her. Terrence Blake was 17 years old, tall and lean with the build of an athlete. He wore a faded gray hoodie, black joggers, and carried a worn sports duffel bag over his shoulder. His sneakers were scuffed but clean. He had just spent 3 intense weeks in Phoenix at the Olympic trials, and after years of relentless training, early mornings on the track, and pushing his body beyond every limit, he had done it. He had qualified for the United States Olympic team in the 100-meter sprint. The news was still sinking in. His coach had hugged him so hard he could barely breathe. His teammates had lifted him on their shoulders. But now, exhausted and emotionally drained, all he wanted was to get home to Chicago to see his mom, to sleep in his own bed. He walked down the aisle checking his boarding pass against the seat numbers until he found row 18. When Terrence reached his row, he glanced at the woman sitting by the window. She was scrolling through her phone, her expression one of polite disinterest. He cleared his throat softly and said, "Excuse me, ma'am. I think I'm in the middle seat here." Bethany looked up, and in that instant her expression changed. Her eyes traveled from his face down to his hoodie, to his duffel bag, to his sneakers, and back up again. Something cold flickered across her features. She didn't smile. She didn't nod. Instead, she pulled her earbuds out slowly and turned toward the aisle, where a flight attendant was helping another passenger with luggage. Bethany raised her hand slightly and called out, "Excuse me, excuse me." The flight attendant, a woman named Lucinda with warm brown skin and kind eyes, approached with a practiced smile. "Yes, ma'am, how can I help you?" Bethany lowered her voice, but not quite enough. "Is there any other seat available? I'd prefer not to sit next to him." She gestured vaguely toward Terrence without looking at him. The words hung in the air like a slap. Terrence felt his stomach tighten. He had heard those words before, in different forms, in different places. At stores where security followed him. At restaurants, where hostesses seated him near the kitchen. At school, where teachers assumed he was trouble before he even spoke. But it never got easier. Lucinda's smile faded. She glanced at Terrence, then back at Bethany, her professionalism barely masking her disgust. "Ma'am, this is a completely full flight. There are no other seats available." Bethany's jaw tightened. "Well, surely you can do something. I'm uncomfortable." Terrence stood frozen in the aisle, his duffel bag still hanging from his shoulder. He felt the eyes of other passengers on him. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked away quickly, pretending not to notice. A businessman across the aisle frowned, but said nothing. A young couple 2 rows up whispered to each other. Terrence wanted to disappear. He wanted to say something to defend himself, but his throat felt tight. Finally, he managed, "Ma'am, I just want to sit down. I won't bother you, I promise." His voice was quiet, respectful, even though anger and humiliation were boiling inside him. Bethany didn't even turn her head. "I didn't ask you to speak." Her tone was icy, dismissive, as if he were invisible. Lucinda took a deep breath, clearly struggling to maintain her composure. "Ma'am, I need you to allow this young man to take his assigned seat or we will have to involve the captain." Bethany's face flushed red.
"This is ridiculous. I pay for my tickets just like everyone else. I should have the right to feel comfortable."
What Bethany didn't know, what she couldn't have known in that moment, was that 3 rows behind her, seated by the window in row 21, was Gerald Morrison. Gerald was the founder and CEO of Morrison & Associates, the very company that employed Bethany. He was 71 years old, a distinguished man with silver hair and sharp blue eyes. He had built his firm from nothing over 4 decades, and he prided himself on its reputation for integrity, diversity, and respect. He had been returning from a business trip in Phoenix, traveling in economy, because he believed leaders should occasionally experience what their employees experienced. He had been listening to a podcast with his headphones on when the commotion began. When he removed his earbuds to hear better, he recognized Bethany's voice immediately. Gerald watched the entire exchange unfold. He saw the way Bethany looked at Terrence. He heard every word she said. He saw the young man's dignity in the face of humiliation, and he felt something harden inside him. This was not just a personal failing. This was a reflection on his company. Bethany wore the Morrison & Associates name every day. She represented them to clients, to partners, to the world. And here she was, displaying behavior that violated everything the company stood for. After nearly 15 minutes of back and forth, another passenger, an older white man seated across the aisle, finally stood up and said gruffly, "I'll switch with the kid. Just let him sit down so we can take off." Terrence nodded gratefully and moved to the new seat. Bethany exhaled in relief, offered a tight smile, and put her earbuds back in. She closed her eyes, completely unaware that her entire world was about to collapse. Gerald Morrison took out his phone and made a note in his calendar, "Meeting with HR, Bethany Crawford, first thing tomorrow morning." His face was expressionless, but his jaw was set. When Terrence finally arrived home in Chicago just after midnight, his mother Loretta was waiting up for him. She was a 50-year-old woman who worked as a nurse at Cook County Hospital, often pulling double shifts to make ends meet. She had raised Terrence alone since his father left when he was 3. Every medal, every trophy, every victory Terrence had ever earned was as much hers as it was his. When he walked through the door, she saw immediately that something was wrong. His shoulders were slumped. His eyes were red. "Baby, what happened?" she asked, pulling him into a hug. Terrence dropped his bag and just held on to her. "Mama, it happened again." She didn't need him to explain what it meant. She had seen it too many times herself. "Tell me," she said gently. Terrence recounted the incident on the plane, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and sadness. "She looked at me like I was trash, Mama. Like I didn't belong there. And I just qualified for the Olympics. I'm representing our country, but to her, I was just another black kid in a hoodie." Loretta's heart broke and raged at the same time. She stroked his hair and said firmly, "Listen to me, Terrence Blake. You are extraordinary. You are headed to the Olympics. You are going to make history. Don't let ignorant people dim your light. They don't deserve that power over you." Terrence nodded, but the hurt lingered. He went to bed that night with his gold medal dreams clouded by the sting of rejection. What neither of them knew was that the incident was already spreading far beyond that plane. A passenger seated 2 rows ahead of Bethany had recorded the entire confrontation on her phone. Her name was Maya, a college student studying journalism. She had watched in disbelief as Bethany openly discriminated against Terrence, and she knew she had to document it. When the plane landed, she uploaded the video to Twitter with the caption, "This woman refused to sit next to a black teenager on our flight tonight. Said she was uncomfortable. This is what racism looks like in 2024. Absolutely disgusting. Hashtag no to racism. Hashtag speak up." Within hours, the video had been retweeted thousands of times. By the next morning, it had been viewed over 2 million times. The comments section exploded. "This is sickening. Who is this woman? She needs to be held accountable. That poor kid. I hope he's okay. Someone find out where she works and report her." People were furious, and rightfully so. The video was raw, unfiltered proof of the kind of casual racism that Black people faced every single day. And the internet was not going to let it slide. Then a sports journalist named Marcus Chen recognized Terrence from the video. He had been covering the Olympic trials and knew exactly who that young man was. He tweeted, "Hold up. That teenager she refused to sit next to, that's Terrence Blake. He just qualified for Team USA track and field in the 100-meter sprint. He's 17 years old, heading to the Paris Olympics, and she treated him like a threat. Let that sink in. Hashtag Terrence Blake. Hashtag Olympic champion." That tweet changed everything. Suddenly, this wasn't just a story about racism. It was a story about a woman who had humiliated a future Olympian. A kid who had worked his entire life to represent his country simply because of the color of his skin. The media picked up the story immediately. News outlets across the country ran segments with headlines like "Woman refuses to sit next to Olympic qualifier sparks outrage and viral video exposes racism on commercial flight." Terrence's name began trending on Twitter. People dug up interviews with him, videos of his races, stories about his journey from the south side of Chicago to the Olympic trials. He was a kid who woke up at 5 in the morning to train before school. A kid whose mom worked 3 jobs to afford his coaching fees. A kid who had overcome poverty, violence in his neighborhood, and countless obstacles to chase his dream. And Bethany Crawford had treated him like he was nothing. Meanwhile, internet sleuths were working overtime to identify Bethany. It didn't take long. Someone recognized her face. Someone else found her LinkedIn profile. Within 24 hours, her full name, her employer, and even her neighborhood were public knowledge. Morrison and Associates started receiving emails. Hundreds of them. Clients, partners, and community members all demanded the same thing: accountability. How can you employ someone who behaves this way? This reflects poorly on your company. We will not do business with a firm that tolerates racism. Gerald Morrison arrived at his office early that Wednesday morning. His assistant handed him a stack of printed emails all concerning Bethany Crawford. He read through them with a deepening frown. Then he called an emergency meeting with Priscilla Hayes, the Director of Human Resources, and Howard Chen, the company's lead attorney. The 3 of them sat in the glass-walled conference room overlooking downtown Atlanta. Gerald pulled up the video on the large screen and played it without saying a word. When it ended, the room was silent. Priscilla shook her head slowly. "I can't believe this. I just can't believe it." Howard adjusted his glasses and said carefully, "From a legal standpoint, we have grounds for termination based on violation of company code of conduct. Her behavior constitutes a serious breach." Gerald nodded. "I was on that plane. I saw it with my own eyes. This isn't hearsay. This isn't a misunderstanding. Bethany Crawford publicly humiliated a 17-year-old boy because of his race. I will not have someone like that representing this company." Priscilla pulled up Bethany's employee file. "She's been with us for 12 years. No prior complaints. Excellent performance reviews. But this..." She trailed off. Gerald cut in. "I don't care if she's been here 20 years. This behavior is unacceptable. Schedule a meeting with her for 9 o'clock this morning. We're terminating her employment immediately." At 8:55, Bethany walked into the Morrison and Associates building, still blissfully unaware of the firestorm around her. She noticed a few colleagues glancing at her strangely in the elevator, but she dismissed it. When she reached her floor, her assistant looked pale. "Bethany, HR wants to see you right away." Bethany frowned. "Now, I just got here." The assistant nodded nervously. "They said it's urgent." A small knot of anxiety formed in Bethany's stomach, but she assumed it was some procedural issue. She walked down the hall to the executive conference room and opened the door. Sitting at the long table were Gerald Morrison, Priscilla Hayes, and Howard Chen. The atmosphere was glacial. Bethany's confusion deepened. "Mr. Morrison, I didn't know you were back from Phoenix." Is everything okay? Gerald gestured to the chair across from him. Sit down, Miss Crawford. His tone was formal, cold. She sat, her hands folding nervously in her lap. Gerald leaned forward, his eyes hard. I was on your flight yesterday evening, row 21. I saw everything. Bethany's heart stopped. The memory of the plane rushed back. The teenager, the argument, the seat switch. Oh no, oh no. Gerald continued, that young man you refused to sit next to, his name is Terrence Blake. He just qualified for the United States Olympic team, and you treated him with open contempt because of the color of his skin. Bethany's face went white. Mr. Morrison the First. It wasn't like that. I just felt uncomfortable. I didn't mean... Stop. Gerald's voice was sharp. I watched you. I heard every word. There is no excuse, no justification for what you did. Priscilla turned the laptop toward Bethany. On the screen was the viral video now with over 5 million views. Bethany watched herself on the screen, heard her own voice saying those terrible words, saw the look on Terrence's face. She felt like she was going to be sick. Howard spoke next, his voice calm but firm. Miss Crawford, we have received hundreds of complaints from clients, partners, and community members. Your behavior has caused significant reputational damage to this firm. Bethany's voice was barely a whisper. Please, I've worked here for 12 years. I've never had a single complaint. This was just one mistake. I'll apologize. I'll do whatever it takes. Gerald stood up. Your employment with Morrison and Associates is terminated effective immediately. You have 30 minutes to collect your personal belongings and vacate the premises. Security will escort you out. Bethany's world shattered. You can't do this. I'll sue for wrongful termination. Priscilla slid a folder across the table. Our legal team is fully prepared. Your conduct constitutes gross misconduct and a violation of company policy. You have no grounds for a lawsuit. Bethany stumbled out of the conference room, tears streaming down her face. Colleagues stared as she walked to her office. Whispers followed her. She shoved her things into a cardboard box with shaking hands, framed photos, a coffee mug, a planner, awards she had won. Everything felt surreal, like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. A security guard appeared at her door. Ma'am, I need to escort you out. She nodded numbly and followed him through the office. People watched. Some looked away. Others whispered. By the time she reached the lobby, she was sobbing. Outside, Bethany sat in her car and called her husband. Devin, I've been fired. There was a long pause. What? Why? She could barely get the words out. There was an incident on the plane yesterday. It went viral. I refused to sit next to a black teenager, and it turned out he's going to the Olympics. My boss was on the plane. He saw everything. It's all over the news. Devin's voice was tight. Bethany, what did you do? She cried harder. I don't know. I didn't think. And now it's everywhere. My career is over. The news of Bethany's termination spread almost as quickly as the original video. Morrison and Associates released a public statement that same afternoon. We have terminated the employment of an individual whose discriminatory behavior on a recent flight does not align with the values of respect, diversity, and inclusion that our firm was built upon. We condemn racism in all its forms and remain committed to fostering an environment of equality. The statement was picked up by every major news outlet. Headlines screamed, Atlanta executive fired after racist incident with teen Olympian company takes swift action against employee caught on viral video, woman loses job after refusing to sit next to black Olympic qualifier. Bethany's name was now permanently linked to the word racist in search engines. Her LinkedIn profile was flooded with angry messages. Her Facebook page, which she hadn't set to private, became a target for thousands of comments. Strangers found her address and posted it online. By that evening, protesters had gathered outside her home in Buckhead, holding signs that read, "Racism has no place here," and "Justice for Terrence." News vans parked on her street. Reporters knocked on her door. Bethany pulled all the curtains shut and hid inside with her family. Devin came home from work early, his face pale. Bethany, my boss, called me into his office today. He asked if I shared your views. I had to defend myself at my own job because of what you did. Bethany felt a fresh wave of shame. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. Devin shook his head. But it did happen. And now our whole family is paying the price. Their daughter Chloe came downstairs, her eyes red from crying. Mom, kids at school are calling me names. They're saying terrible things. I had to leave early because I couldn't stop crying. Wyatt, their 11-year-old son, didn't say anything. He just went to his room and closed the door. The silence from him hurt more than any words could have. Bethany tried to go to his room to explain, to apologize, but he wouldn't open the door. Wyatt, please let me talk to you. His voice came through the door, small and broken. I don't want to talk to you right now. Bethany sank down against the wall outside his room and cried. Over the next few days, the isolation intensified. Friends stopped calling. Text messages went unanswered. Women she had known for years, women she had gone to book club with, taken yoga classes with, attended charity events, with all of them disappeared. One of her closest friends, a woman named Francine, sent a single text message. Bethany, I can't be associated with you anymore. What you did was unforgivable. Please don't contact me again. Bethany stared at the message for a long time before deleting Francine's number. The neighborhood turned against her too. The Homeowners Association sent a formal letter suggesting that she and her family consider relocating for the good of the community. Neighbors who used to wave hello now crossed the street to avoid her. Someone spray-painted the word racist on their garage door in the middle of the night. Devin had to repaint it himself at 6 in the morning before the kids saw it. The financial pressure mounted quickly. Bethany had been the primary breadwinner in the family. Without her income, they couldn't afford their mortgage, their car payments, their children's private school tuition. Devin was doing his best, but his salary alone wasn't enough. Bethany tried applying for new jobs, but every application was met with silence or outright rejection. Her name was too recognizable now. A simple Google search brought up hundreds of articles about the incident. No company wanted to take the risk of hiring someone with her reputation. She was unemployable. One recruiter was blunt enough to tell her over the phone, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but we can't even consider your application. Your name is associated with a major public relations crisis. No company is going to touch you." Bethany hung up and stared at the rejection email on her screen until the words blurred. Her mental health deteriorated rapidly. She stopped sleeping through the night. She would lie awake for hours, replaying the incident in her mind, wondering what she could have done differently, wishing she could take it all back. She stopped eating regularly. She lost weight. Her hands shook constantly. She couldn't watch the news without seeing her own face or hearing Terrence's name. She felt like she was suffocating under the weight of her own actions. One afternoon, she tried to write a public apology and posted it on her Facebook page. I deeply regret my actions on that flight. I was wrong, and I am truly sorry to Terrence Blake and to everyone I hurt. I am working to become a better person. But the response was brutal. Comments flooded in within minutes. Too little, too late. You're only sorry because you got caught. Actions have consequences. You don't deserve forgiveness. Bethany deleted the post after an hour and deactivated her account entirely. Meanwhile, Terrence's star continued to rise. He appeared on Good Morning America, where he spoke with grace and maturity about the incident. The host asked him, "How did it feel to be treated that way?" Terrence took a deep breath. "It hurt. I won't lie about that, but I've experienced racism before. This wasn't the first time, and it probably won't be the last. What I hope people take from this is that we need to do better. We need to see each other as human beings, not stereotypes." The audience applauded. Donations poured into his training fund. Nike reached out with a sponsorship offer. Stanford University offered him a full athletic scholarship. Bethany watched the interview from her darkened living room. She saw the dignity in Terrence's eyes, heard the forgiveness in his words, and felt an overwhelming sense of shame. This young man, whom she had treated with such disdain, was showing more character and grace than she had ever demonstrated in her entire life. She turned off the television and sat in silence for a long time. Devin came into the room and sat down beside her. He didn't say anything for a while. Finally, he spoke. "Bethany, we need to talk about our marriage." Her heart sank. She had been dreading this conversation. "Devin, please don't." He shook his head. "I love you. I've loved you for 20 years. But I don't know if I can stay in this marriage if you don't genuinely change. The kids are suffering. I'm suffering. And I need to know that the woman I married is still in there somewhere." Bethany looked at him through tears. "I don't know who I am anymore. I thought I was a good person. I thought I'd left behind all the ignorance I grew up with. But I was wrong. And I don't know how to fix this." Devin took her hand. "Then you need to figure it out. Because if you don't, I'm going to have to protect our children, even if that means protecting them from you." Those words broke something inside her. She realized she was on the verge of losing everything that mattered: her husband, her children, her sense of self. She had to change. Not for public approval, not to get her job back, but because if she didn't, she would lose her family and herself forever. Now, before we continue with Bethany's journey toward redemption, I want to ask you something. Do you believe people can truly change, or are some actions simply unforgivable? Comment the number 1 if you think Bethany deserves a chance to make things right. And if you think this story is opening your eyes to issues you've never considered before, smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this powerful journey. Also, share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Now, the question is, can Bethany really transform, or is it already too late? Let's find out. The next morning, Bethany sat across from Devin at their kitchen table. The house was quiet. The kids had already left for school. Devin slid a piece of paper across the table. It was the name and contact information for Dr. Imani Washington, a psychologist who specialized in racial bias and prejudice. "I think you need to talk to someone," Devin said gently. "Someone who can help you understand why you did what you did." Bethany stared at the name. Dr. Imani Washington, a black woman. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Do you think she'll even agree to see me?" Bethany asked quietly. Devin shrugged. "There's only one way to find out." That afternoon, Bethany called the number. A calm, professional voice answered. "Dr. Washington's office, how may I help you?" Bethany's throat tightened. "Hi, my name is Bethany Crawford. I was wondering if Dr. Washington might have any availability for a session." There was a pause. The receptionist's tone cooled slightly. "May I ask what this is regarding?" Bethany closed her eyes. "I need help understanding my own prejudices. I did something terrible and I need to change." Another pause. "Hold, please." When Dr. Imani Washington came on the line, her voice was steady and measured. "Miss Crawford, I'm aware of who you are. I've seen the video. Why do you want to see me?" Bethany's voice cracked. "Because I don't want to be that person anymore. I grew up in a racist town. I thought I'd left all that behind, but I didn't. And I hurt someone who didn't deserve it. I need help. Please." Dr. Washington was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "I'll see you Thursday at 2 o'clock. But I need you to understand something. This won't be easy. If you're coming to me just to repair your public image, this won't work. You have to be willing to do the hard work of looking at yourself honestly." Bethany nodded even though Dr. Washington couldn't see her. "I understand. Thank you." Thursday came and Bethany walked into Dr. Washington's office with her heart pounding. The office was warm and inviting, with soft lighting and comfortable chairs. Dr. Washington was a woman in her 50s, with natural hair, kind eyes, and a calm presence. She gestured to a chair. "Please sit." Bethany sat down, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Dr. Washington didn't start with pleasantries. She got straight to the point. "Tell me what happened on that plane." Bethany recounted the story, her voice shaking. When she finished, Dr. Washington asked, "Why did you feel uncomfortable sitting next to Terrence?" Bethany hesitated. This was the question she had been avoiding. "I don't know," she started, but Dr. Washington shook her head. "Yes, you do. You might not want to admit it, but you know. Bethany swallowed hard. I looked at him, and I saw his hoodie and his bag, and I assumed he was trouble. I assumed he didn't belong there. I assumed he was dangerous. Doctor. Washington leaned forward. Based on what evidence? Bethany's voice was barely a whisper. There was no evidence. Just my assumptions. Just the color of his skin. Dr. Washington nodded slowly. That's called implicit bias. It's the prejudice we carry without even realizing it, shaped by the culture we grow up in, the media we consume, the messages we absorb. But here's the thing, Bethany. Recognizing it is only the first step. Changing it requires consistent, uncomfortable work. Over the next several weeks, Bethany attended sessions twice a week. Dr. Washington assigned her readings books on the history of racism in America, memoirs by Black authors, studies on implicit bias. Bethany read The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. She read Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. She watched documentaries like 13th and When They See Us. Each session, Dr. Washington asked hard questions. What did you learn this week? How did this reading make you feel? Can you see how your privilege has shielded you from these realities? Bethany cried through many sessions. She confronted memories from her childhood in Alabama, where the N-word was used casually at family dinners, where segregation was still practiced socially, if not legally, where she had absorbed the message that Black people were somehow lesser. She had thought moving to Atlanta, going to college, building a career had erased all of that. But it hadn't. It had just gone underground, hiding in her subconscious, waiting for a moment like that plane ride to reveal itself. At home, things remained tense. Chloe was slowly warming back up to her mother, but Wyatt still kept his distance. One evening, Chloe came into the living room where Bethany was reading. "Mom, what are you reading?" Bethany held up the book. "It's called Stamped from the Beginning. It's about the history of racist ideas in America." Chloe sat down beside her. "Are you trying to change?" Bethany nodded, tears in her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm trying so hard. I never want you to grow up thinking the way I did." Chloe hugged her. "I'm proud of you, Mom." But Wyatt overheard from the hallway and walked away without a word. That night, Bethany wrote a letter. Not for publication, not for social media. A private letter to Terrence Blake. She poured her heart into it, apologizing not just for the incident, but for the pain she had caused, for the assumptions she had made, for the privilege she had wielded without thought. She explained that she was in therapy, that she was reading, and learning that she didn't expect forgiveness, but wanted him to know she was trying to change. She mailed the letter to his coach's office, hoping it would reach him. Days turned into weeks, and Bethany heard nothing back. She didn't expect to, but the act of writing it, of owning her actions fully, felt like a small step forward. Meanwhile, her financial situation worsened. They had to pull the kids out of private school and enroll them in public school. They sold one of their cars. They downsized from their house in Buckhead to a modest apartment in a middle-class neighborhood. The loss of material comfort was painful, but it also forced Bethany to confront her privilege in new ways. She had always equated success with wealth and status. Now, stripped of those things, she had to figure out who she was without them. One afternoon, she sat in a park near their new apartment, watching children of all races play together on the playground. A Black mother sat on the bench beside her, watching her own children. Bethany wanted to say something, to apologize, to explain, but she stayed silent. What right did she have to intrude on this woman's peace? The woman glanced at her and smiled politely. Bethany smiled back, feeling a lump in her throat. Such a simple human interaction, and yet it felt monumental. That evening, Devin came home and sat down with her. "I've been thinking," he said carefully. "I know things have been hard, but I see you trying. I see you reading. I see you going to therapy. I see you changing. And I want you to know that I'm here. I'm not giving up on you." Bethany broke down in his arms. "I'm so sorry for everything I've put you and the kids through." Devin held her. "We'll get through this, but you have to keep doing the work." She nodded against his chest. "I will. I promise." 6 months had passed since the incident on the plane. For Terrence Blake, those 6 months had been a whirlwind. He trained harder than ever, waking up before dawn to run sprints, working with his coach on technique, building strength and endurance. The support from the public had been overwhelming. Donations to his training fund allowed his mother Loretta to finally cut back to just one job. Nike signed him to a sponsorship deal. Stanford confirmed his full-ride scholarship for after the Olympics. He was featured in Sports Illustrated, profiled in the New York Times, invited to speak at schools and community centers. But through it all, Terrence remained humble. He remembered where he came from. He remembered the nights when his mom couldn't afford to pay the electric bill and they ate dinner by candlelight. He remembered running on cracked tracks in dangerous neighborhoods because that was all they had. He remembered being followed in stores, stopped by police, judged before he even opened his mouth. The plane incident had been painful, but it hadn't broken him. If anything, it had fueled his determination to succeed, to prove that he was more than anyone's assumptions. One evening, his coach handed him a letter. "This came for you a few months ago. I wasn't sure if I should give it to you, but I think you should read it." Terrence opened the envelope and saw Bethany Crawford's name at the top. His stomach tightened. He almost threw it away, but curiosity got the better of him. He read the letter slowly, carefully. It was long, handwritten, and raw. She didn't make excuses. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She simply owned what she had done and explained that she was trying to change. At the end, she wrote, "You deserved respect, and I gave you humiliation. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be better. I hope you achieve every dream you've ever had. You are extraordinary, and I was too ignorant to see it. I'm sorry." Terrence sat with the letter for a long time. Part of him was still angry. Part of him wanted to rip it up. But another part of him, the part shaped by his mother's teachings about grace and forgiveness, felt something else. He folded the letter and put it in his drawer. He wasn't ready to respond yet, but he wasn't ready to throw it away either. Meanwhile, Bethany's transformation continued. She had started volunteering at a local nonprofit called Hope for Unity Foundation, an organization dedicated to racial reconciliation and community building. At first, several staff members were skeptical about her involvement, but the director, Reverend Elvin Thompson, a black pastor in his 60s who had marched with Dr. King, believed in second chances. "Everyone deserves a chance to change," he told his staff, "but words are cheap. Let's see what she does." Bethany did everything asked of her and more. She answered phones, filed paperwork, organized events. She attended workshops on racial justice. She listened to the stories of black community members who had experienced discrimination in housing, employment, education, healthcare. Each story chipped away at her old worldview, replacing it with empathy and understanding. She began to see how systemic racism worked, how it wasn't just about individual prejudice, but about structures and policies that had been designed to keep black people marginalized. One day, Reverend Thompson asked her to speak at a community forum about her experience. Bethany was terrified. "I don't know if I should. People hate me. They won't want to hear from me." Reverend Thompson looked at her kindly. "You're right that people are angry. But your story, if told honestly, can help others confront their own biases. It can start conversations. It's not about making yourself feel better. It's about contributing to healing." Bethany agreed. The night of the forum, the community center was packed. Bethany stood at the podium, her hands shaking. She looked out at the crowd and saw faces of all colors, some curious, some skeptical, some openly hostile. She took a deep breath and began. "My name is Bethany Crawford. A year ago, I was the woman who refused to sit next to a black teenager on a plane. I lost my job. I lost my friends. I almost lost my family. But the worst loss was my sense of humanity." She told her story without sugarcoating it. She talked about growing up in a racist environment, about carrying those biases into adulthood, about the moment on the plane when all of that ugliness came out. "I can't undo what I did," she said, her voice breaking. "But I can commit to doing better every single day. I can educate myself. I can listen. I can use whatever small platform I have to speak out against racism. I can raise my children to be better than I was, and I can work to earn back the trust I shattered." When she finished, the room was silent. Then slowly a few people began to clap. Not everyone, but enough. After the event, several people came up to her. Some to criticize, some to thank her for her honesty, some just to share their own stories. At home, Wyatt finally started talking to her again. One night, he knocked on her bedroom door. "Mom, can I ask you something?" Bethany sat up. "Of course, sweetheart." Wyatt sat on the edge of the bed. "Do you really think you've changed?" Bethany thought carefully before answering. "I think I'm changing. It's not something that happens overnight, but I'm trying every day to be better than I was yesterday. And I promise you, I will never stop trying." Wyatt nodded slowly. "Okay, I believe you. Meine Story ACCPS. And Vetter 5, we're telling it phrase. And never for minute. Never for minute. And please like us stores. Never 5 minute." That small moment of reconciliation meant more to Bethany than any public apology ever could. Months passed. Bethany continued her work at Hope for Unity Foundation. She wrote articles for their newsletter about her journey, about confronting privilege, about the work of anti-racism. Some people praised her efforts. Others accused her of trying to profit from her mistakes. She learned to tune out the noise and focus on the work itself. She wasn't doing this for applause. She was doing it because it was right. One afternoon, she received an email from Loretta Blake Terrence's mother. Bethany's heart raced as she opened it. The email was brief. "Mrs. Crawford, I wanted you to know that I read the letter you sent to my son. I also know about the work you've been doing. Terrence showed me an article you wrote. It takes courage to admit you were wrong and to change. I don't speak for my son, but I wanted to tell you that I see your effort. I hope you continue on this path. Sincerely, Loretta Blake." Bethany read the email 3 times, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was acknowledgement. It was grace, and it gave her the strength to keep going. The Paris Olympics arrived in the summer. The world watched as athletes from every nation gathered to compete. Terrence Blake, now 18 years old, stood on the track at Stade de France representing the United States in the 100-meter final. 80,000 people filled the stadium. Hundreds of millions watched on television around the world. His mother Loretta sat in the stands wearing a shirt with his face on it, tears already streaming down her cheeks. His coach stood nearby, gripping the railing, his knuckles white. This was the moment they had worked toward for years. Terrence looked up at the massive stadium, the lights, the cameras, the flags. He thought about the long road that had brought him here, the early mornings, the injuries, the doubt, the sacrifices his mother had made. And yes, he thought about that plane ride, about the woman who had looked at him with contempt. He had turned that pain into fuel. He had used it to push himself harder. And now he was here. The starter called the runners to their marks. Terrence crouched in lane 5, his muscles coiled, his mind focused. The stadium fell silent. Then the crack of the starting gun. Terrence exploded out of the blocks. His legs pumped like pistons. He could feel the other runners beside him, but he didn't look. He kept his eyes forward, focused on the finish line. At the 50-meter mark, he was neck and neck with the Jamaican runner in lane 6. At 70 meters, he began to pull ahead. The crowd roared. At 90 meters, he could feel it. Victory. He crossed the finish line first, arms raised, and fell to his knees, overcome with emotion. The clock read 9.78 seconds. A new Olympic record. Gold medal. The stadium erupted. Loretta sobbed in the stands, her hands over her mouth. Terrence's coach jumped up and down, screaming. Teammates rushed onto the track to embrace him. Terrence couldn't stop crying. He had done it. A kid from the south side of Chicago. A kid who had been profiled, discriminated against, doubted. He had proven them all wrong. In the post-race interview, a reporter asked Terrence, "You've overcome so much to get here. What does this gold medal mean to you?" Terrence wiped his eyes and smiled. "This medal isn't just for me. It's for every kid who's been judged by the color of their skin instead of the content of their character. It's for my mom who worked 3 jobs so I could chase this dream. It's for everyone who believed in me when the world didn't. This is proof that we are more than people's assumptions." Another reporter asked, "Do you have a message for those who have discriminated against you?" Terrence paused, thinking, "I don't hold grudges. Hate only weighs you down. What I hope is that my success shows people that we should never underestimate anyone based on how they look. We all have potential. We all deserve respect, and we all deserve a chance to shine." Back in her small apartment in Atlanta, Bethany sat on the couch watching the race. Devin sat beside her, their children on the floor in front of the TV. When Terrence crossed the finish line, Chloe jumped up cheering. Wyatt clapped. Devin smiled, and Bethany cried. She watched Terrence receive his gold medal, watched the American flag rise, heard the national anthem play. She felt overwhelming pride for this young man she had once wronged. She whispered to the screen, "I'm so sorry. And I'm so proud of you." 2 weeks later, Bethany received a letter in the mail. There was no return address, but when she opened it, she recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Terrence. Her hands shook as she unfolded the page. The letter read, "Mrs. Crawford, I got your letter. I won't lie and say what you did didn't hurt. It did. A lot. But I've thought about it a lot over the past year. And I've realized that holding on to anger only hurts me. I don't know if you're really changing or if you're just trying to fix your image. But my mom told me about the work you've been doing, and I read some of the things you've written. If you're being honest, then I respect that. It takes courage to admit you were wrong. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I hope you keep growing. I hope you keep learning. And I hope you teach your kids to be better. Life's too short to carry hate. Wishing you and your family well, Terrence Blake." Bethany clutched the letter to her chest and sobbed. Devin came into the room.
What is it?
She handed him the letter. He read it and pulled her into his arms. "He's an incredible young man," Devin said quietly. Bethany nodded. "He is. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve this second chance." A year and a half after the incident, Bethany had rebuilt her life in ways she never could have imagined. She was no longer the high-powered executive living in a mansion. She was a community organizer earning a modest salary, living in a 2-bedroom apartment, driving a used car. And she was happier than she had been in years. She had found purpose in her work at Hope for Unity Foundation, where she now served as the Director of Community Outreach. She organized workshops on racial bias. She facilitated difficult conversations between people of different backgrounds. She worked with schools to implement anti-racism curricula. Reverend Thompson watched her transformation with quiet satisfaction. One day he called her into his office. "Bethany, I want you to know how proud I am of the work you've been doing. You came here broken and ashamed, and you've turned that into something meaningful. You've helped a lot of people." Bethany felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, Reverend. This work has saved me." He nodded. "I have a favor to ask. There's a national conference on racial reconciliation happening next month in Chicago. They've asked me to recommend a speaker, someone with a powerful story of transformation. I'd like to recommend you." Bethany's stomach dropped. "Chicago, that's Terrence's hometown. I can't. What if I run into him? What if?" Reverend Thompson held up a hand. "You don't have to go. But I think your story could help a lot of people. Think about it." Bethany thought about it for days. Finally, she agreed. She traveled to Chicago for the conference, a 3-day event attended by activists, educators, religious leaders, and community members from across the country. On the second day, she was scheduled to speak on a panel about personal transformation and accountability. When she stepped onto the stage, she saw hundreds of faces looking up at her, some curious, some skeptical, some supportive. She took a deep breath and began. "My name is Bethany Crawford, and I'm a recovering racist." The bluntness of the statement caught people off guard. I say recovering because this isn't something you fix overnight. It's ongoing work. Every day I have to choose to confront my biases, to listen, to learn, to do better. She told her story once again, but this time she went deeper. She talked about the uncomfortable work of therapy. She talked about the shame of losing everything. She talked about the grace of strangers who gave her a chance to change. "People ask me if I've forgiven myself," she said. The truth is, I'm not sure I have, but I've stopped waiting for forgiveness to move forward. I'm focused on action, on being part of the solution instead of the problem, on raising my children to dismantle the systems of oppression that I once benefited from without question. When she finished, the applause was warm. Afterward, dozens of people came up to talk to her. Some shared their own stories of transformation. Others challenged her, asked hard questions, held her accountable. She welcomed all of it. On the last day of the conference, there was a gala fundraiser for racial justice organizations. Bethany attended wearing a simple dress she had bought at a thrift store. She stood near the back of the ballroom, feeling out of place among the crowd of well-dressed attendees. Then the master of ceremonies took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest tonight. He's an Olympic gold medalist, a role model for young people everywhere, and a champion for justice. Please welcome Terrence Blake. Bethany's breath caught. Terrence walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. He looked older, more confident. He wore a sharp suit and carried himself with quiet dignity. He spoke about his foundation, which provided scholarships and resources to young athletes in underserved communities. He talked about the importance of using privilege and platform to lift others up. And then he said something that made Bethany's heart stop. "I want to talk about forgiveness for a moment," Terrence said. "A couple of years ago, I experienced a painful incident of racism. It was public, it was humiliating, but something unexpected came from it. The person who hurt me chose to change. She didn't just apologize and move on. She did the hard work of confronting her own biases. She rebuilt her life around fighting the very thing she once perpetuated. I'm not saying everyone deserves forgiveness, but I do believe people can change. And when they do, we should acknowledge it." Bethany stood frozen. She didn't know if Terrence knew she was in the room, but his words felt like a benediction. After his speech, the crowd mingled. Bethany tried to stay invisible, but then she saw Loretta Blake across the room. Their eyes met. Loretta walked over, and Bethany's heart pounded. "Mrs. Blake the first." Loretta held up a hand and smiled. "I know who you are. I've been following your work. My son showed me the articles you've written." Bethany's voice trembled. "I'm so sorry for what I did to Terrence. He didn't deserve that." Loretta's expression softened. "No, he didn't. But you know what? He used that pain to become even stronger. And it sounds like you've used your shame to become better. That takes courage." Bethany couldn't hold back tears. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Loretta hugged her, and Bethany felt a weight lift from her shoulders. When they pulled apart, Loretta said, "Keep doing the work. Don't stop." Later that evening, as Bethany was leaving the venue, she saw Terrence standing alone near the exit checking his phone. She froze. Should she approach him? Should she leave him alone? Before she could decide, he looked up and saw her. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then Terrence walked over. "Mrs. Crawford," he said quietly. Bethany's voice shook. "Terrence, I don't even know what to say. Congratulations on everything. You're incredible." Terrence nodded. "Thank you. I heard you spoke at the conference. My mom told me about your work." Bethany wiped her eyes. "I'm trying. I know I can never make up for what I did, but I'm trying." Terrence looked at her for a long moment. "I believe you. And, for what it's worth, I meant what I said in my letter. I forgive you." Bethany broke down. "Thank you. Thank you so much." They didn't hug. They didn't exchange numbers, but they shook hands. And in that simple gesture was acknowledgement, respect, and closure. The encounter between Bethany and Terrence became a turning point. A photographer at the event had captured the moment they shook hands, and the image went viral. The same internet that had once destroyed Bethany now shared the photo with captions like, "The power of forgiveness, from racism to redemption, and two people choosing healing over hate." News outlets picked up the story. 60 Minutes reached out, asking if both Bethany and Terrence would be willing to sit down for an interview together. At first, Bethany was hesitant. "I don't want this to be about me," she told the producer. "Terrence is the story. He's the hero." But Terrence agreed to do it with one condition: that the interview focus on systemic change, not just their personal story. The interview was filmed in a studio in New York. Bethany and Terrence sat across from the interviewer, a veteran journalist named Leslie Stahl. The conversation was honest and difficult. Leslie asked Terrence, "How did you find it in yourself to forgive her?" Terrence thought for a moment. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of anger. I forgave her because I wanted peace. But I also want to be clear: forgiveness doesn't mean there shouldn't be accountability. People who do harm need to face consequences. But if they genuinely change, we should acknowledge that too. Leslie turned to Bethany.
What do you say to people who think you're only doing this to rehabilitate your image?
Bethany looked directly at the camera. I understand why people are skeptical. I would be too. All I can do is keep showing up, keep doing the work, and let my actions speak for themselves. This isn't about my image. It's about my soul. The interview aired to over 20 million viewers. It sparked national conversations about race, accountability, and redemption. Some people praised both Terrence and Bethany for their courage. Others criticized the media for giving Bethany a platform. But the conversation was happening, and that was what mattered. In the wake of the interview, Bethany was invited to speak at universities, corporations, and community organizations across the country. She talked about privilege bias and the hard work of change. She also wrote a book, a memoir, titled The Seat Beside Me: A Journey from Prejudice to Understanding. She donated all the proceeds to organizations fighting racial injustice. The book became a bestseller not because people wanted to celebrate her, but because it was raw and unflinching in its honesty. She didn't portray herself as a hero. She portrayed herself as a cautionary tale and a work in progress. Meanwhile, Terrence used his platform to advocate for systemic change. He spoke out against racial profiling, police brutality, and inequities in education and healthcare. He partnered with the ACLU, the NAACP, and other civil rights organizations. He established the Terrence Blake Foundation, which provided scholarships, mentorship, and resources to young Black athletes. His influence reached far beyond the track. He became a voice for his generation, using his fame to push for a more just society. At home, Bethany's family had healed. Chloe was now in high school, volunteering at the Hope for Unity Foundation alongside her mother. Wyatt, now 13, had become an advocate against bullying and discrimination at his school. Devin had stood by Bethany through it all, and their marriage was stronger than ever. One evening, they sat together on the couch, watching the sunset through their small apartment window. "Do you ever miss the old life?" Devin asked. Bethany shook her head. "Not for a second. I was empty then. I'm full now." The impact of their story rippled outward. Airlines began implementing mandatory anti-bias training for employees. Corporations overhauled their diversity and inclusion programs. Schools started teaching about implicit bias and systemic racism. Bethany and Terrence's story became a case study in restorative justice, used in classrooms and workshops around the world. 2 years after the Olympics, Terrence was preparing for the next Games in Los Angeles. He was training harder than ever, determined to defend his title. Bethany continued her work at Hope for Unity Foundation, now traveling internationally to speak about reconciliation and justice. Their paths crossed occasionally at events, and each time they greeted each other with mutual respect. One day, Bethany received an unexpected call. It was from Terrence. "Mrs. Crawford, I have something I'd like to discuss with you. Can we meet?" They met at a cafe in Chicago. Terrence looked serious. "I've been thinking a lot about the work you've been doing, and I want to do something to support it." He slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a check for $100,000 made out to the Hope for Unity Foundation. Bethany gasped. "Terrence, I can't accept this." Terrence smiled. "It's not for you. It's for the cause. You've helped a lot of people change their minds and hearts. That's worth investing in." Bethany's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. This will change so many lives." Terrence stood to leave, then paused. "You know, Mrs. Crawford, I used to wonder if that day on the plane happened for a reason. I think maybe it did. It forced both of us to become better versions of ourselves. That's something. Bethany nodded. It is. Thank you, Terrence. For everything. 3 years after that fateful plane ride, Hope for Unity Foundation held its largest fundraising gala yet. The event took place in a grand ballroom in Chicago, attended by over 500 people, philanthropists, activists, community leaders, and everyday people committed to justice. Bethany stood backstage, her heart racing. She was no longer the keynote speaker, but she was introducing someone very special. Reverend Thompson walked over and put a hand on her shoulder. "You ready?" Bethany nodded. "I think so." She walked onto the stage to warm applause. "Good evening, everyone. 3 years ago, I was a different person. I was someone who let prejudice guide my actions. I hurt a young man who deserved nothing but respect. That moment changed my life. It cost me everything I thought mattered, but it gave me something far more valuable, a conscience, a purpose, and a chance to be part of something bigger than myself." She paused, looking out at the crowd. "Tonight, we're honored to have someone extraordinary with us. He's an Olympic gold medalist, a humanitarian, and a beacon of grace and strength. Please welcome Terrence Blake." The crowd erupted in applause. Terrence walked onto the stage, and Bethany stepped aside. He hugged her briefly before taking the microphone. "Thank you all for being here tonight. I want to start by making an announcement. I'm donating $1 million to the Hope for Unity Foundation." The room gasped. Terrence continued, "And I'm doing it in honor of someone who taught me that transformation is possible. Bethany Crawford came into my life in the worst possible way, but in the years since, she's shown me what real change looks like." She didn't just say she was sorry. She rebuilt her entire life around making things right. Because of her work, thousands of people have confronted their own biases. Hundreds of young people have found opportunities they didn't have before. That's the power of redemption. He turned to Bethany. "Mrs. Crawford, would you come back up here?" Bethany walked over, confused. Terrence handed her an envelope. "This is a scholarship fund in your name. It's specifically for students from communities affected by racism who want to study conflict resolution, social justice, or education. I want your legacy to be about healing, not harm." Bethany couldn't speak. She just cried. The audience stood and applauded. Terrence hugged her, and she whispered, "I don't deserve this." Terrence pulled back and looked her in the eye. "Maybe not, but you've earned it through your work. Don't waste it." After the event, Bethany and Terrence sat together outside on a bench looking at the Chicago skyline. "You know," Terrence said, "I think about that plane sometimes. If it hadn't happened, I don't know if I would be the person I am today. I wouldn't have had the platform to speak out. I wouldn't have started my foundation. Pain can either destroy you or transform you." Bethany nodded. "I think about it every day. It destroyed the person I was, but it gave me the chance to become someone better." Terrence smiled. "We both chose transformation. That's what matters." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had been on opposite sides of a painful moment, now united in the work of building a better world. The camera slowly pulled back, showing them silhouetted against the city lights, a symbol of hope and possibility. The screen faded to black and white text appeared. "Racism is learned. So is compassion. Choose wisely." Then, this story is inspired by countless real experiences of discrimination and the resilience of those who fight for justice. May we all choose to be better. Now I want to hear from you. Do you believe in the power of redemption? Do you think Bethany's transformation was genuine? Comment below and let me know your thoughts. If this story moved, you hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Subscribe to this channel for more powerful true stories that challenge us to grow and change. And remember, every single one of us has the power to choose kindness over prejudice, understanding over ignorance, and love over hate. Thank you for watching, and may you always choose to be on the right side of history. Until next time, stay kind, stay aware, and keep fighting for a better world. This story teaches us that our actions have profound consequences, but transformation is always possible if we choose to do the hard work. Bethany's journey shows that acknowledging our biases is only the first step Real change requires consistent effort, humility, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves. We learn that privilege often blinds us to the struggles of others, and that education and empathy are essential tools for dismantling prejudice. Terrence's grace demonstrates that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing harm, but rather freeing ourselves from the burden of anger while still demanding accountability. His success proves that we should never judge people by their appearance, background, or circumstances. The story also reveals how systemic change begins with individual transformation. When one person commits to growth, the ripple effects can reach thousands. We see that redemption isn't about erasing the past, but about using it as fuel for positive action. Most importantly, this story reminds us that compassion and understanding must be chosen daily. Whether we've been hurt or have caused hurt, we all have the power to break cycles of hatred and build bridges toward healing. Change is possible, but only if we're brave enough to look in the mirror, admit our failures, and commit to becoming better versions of ourselves every single day. What's your biggest takeaway from Bethany and Terrence's story? Do you believe people who show prejudice deserve a second chance if they genuinely change? Have you ever confronted your own biases or witnessed someone transform their perspective? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. If this story opened your eyes to the power of accountability and redemption, smash that like button right now. Subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss stories that challenge us to be better human beings. Share this video with your family, friends, and anyone who needs to hear this message of hope and transformation. Thank you so much for watching and being part of this community that believes in justice, growth, and the power of second chances. Remember, we all have the ability to choose kindness over prejudice, understanding over ignorance, and love over hate. May you always stand on the right side of history and work toward a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. Until next time, stay compassionate, stay aware, and keep fighting for what's right. Peace and blessings to you all.